America, the Northern Fleet. Sight to behold, isn't it, General? And to think it was all funded with private money. I don't care how those ships look or who paid for them. If they can transport me and my men where we need to go, then that's all I need. Land officer to the core, I see. You may be uninterested by its intricacies, General, but at least know that the fleet you're looking at is one of a kind. Not to mention is the only fleet that will support you in your plans. So at the very least thank Minister Daniłowicz, for without him, you and your men would have to swim all across the sea. Before you say anything, General, let me make one matter completely clear. If there was even a single officer willing to commit to this plan, I would have gone to them instead of you. But they all follow Stolarski, and he, together with Wieruszowski, Czwinowski and Jastrowicz, simply cannot understand that the greatest threat to our republic in this war is not on the continent but in England. I may not be a soldier, so perhaps I'm looking at this the wrong way, but to me, war is nothing more than mathematics. And right now, the numbers are clear. British Empire may be unfocused with their forces spread across too many theatres, but if they mobilize their entire empire against us and decide to strike at our homeland, we will not be able to hold them off. I tried to explain this to our president, but he's too fixated on taking Leopold out. So, I took a gamble, again on your behalf, General Poniatowski, because only you are insane enough to risk such a plan alone. Besides, if this plan works out, then the Assembly will finally realize that the future lies in those ships anchored right in front of you. I don't want to put them in your care, General, but I have no other choice, so make sure they return home safely. This is not an investment I want to lose. Now, if you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I'm going back to Warsaw before I change my mind. And there he goes. Well, I can't really blame him for being so angry. After all, his entire fortune is about to sail off to war. But what about you, General? Are you sure about all this? After all, this plan sounds very much like a suicide. Take a look at this list, sir. Do you recognize those names? Oh, should I? No, and this is why I have to set sail, to make sure I won't share their fate. Apologies, General, but I don't think I understand. And perhaps it's because this is none of your business. Let me alleviate your fears by saying that I know what I'm doing, and yes, I am sure about setting sail. But allow me to follow in Minister Daniłowicz's footsteps and remind you that we are not friends. You have done your part in this operation, so just return to your duties and don't bother yourself with affairs that don't concern you. We are all on the same side, General, so your success or your failure are my concern. Besides, you're not about to embark on this mission alone. There are thousands of people coming with you, and many of them used to be my citizens not too long ago, so their lives concern me as well. You're right about one thing. They were your people, right up to the point where you betrayed them for a cozy spot in the Assembly. But worry not about your people, I have no need for dead soldiers. Now enough of this nonsense. The men are prepared, and unless you have something important to say, I'll be on my way. Very well, General. Here's the list of coal stations you need to use to resupply along the way. Try to stay away from the coastline during daytime and only make port at night. We can't risk British spies spotting you before you reach your destination. That's all. For the sake of your men, I wish you luck, General. May you find whatever you seek out there. Greetings everyone and welcome to episode 22 of the Crownless Eagle. We return right where we left off, right after the Battle of Port Royal, Jamaica, where, as you can see, we've scored an overwhelming victory in our first battle against Great Britain. Thanks to our tactics and superior equipment, we took out their entire force, eliminating 10 times as many soldiers as we've lost ourselves. A glorious outcome to be sure, but it's slightly overshadowed by the way how we achieved this victory, namely by using rather ungentlemanly quicklime rounds to inflict horrendous wounds upon our enemies. And the sight of these wounds was so shocking, even to our howitzer crews, that they decided to omit their efficiency in the official report. You are able to see there that, at least according to after-battle stats, our howitzers only scored about 120 kills each, while in reality the number was much higher. Still, we've gained ourselves another rich colonial island and all the plantations located on it, so at the very least our barbarism was worth it, as the money we'll gain from Jamaica will help to stabilize our now declining treasury. It's a long way to go until we are in the green, that's for sure, but it's a step in the right direction. We return to Europe for now, but before we can continue with our campaign, we have to catch up with a few things I forgot to mention in the last episode. As our colonial forces were disembarking on Jamaica, our main European force was busy as well. First, I moved General Rybak from Breslau to Prague in order to consolidate our position and to defend the city in case of Austrian counterattack. They can reach capital of Bohemia in one turn, but they cannot reach Silesia. Second, President Stolarski marched south and deployed his army on a major river crossing on Danube River, denying Imperial forces the ability to travel along the main road to the capital of Bohemia. And together with our president went Commander Mickiewicz and his warband. However, this time they will try to stay back because their numbers are still not replenished. And finally, General Tomasz Tomaka, formerly stationed near Krakow, realized that Imperial forces have abandoned the fort just east of Pressburg, Hungary, and force-marched his troops to take it before our enemies could realize their mistake. And as you can see, he was successful, so now we have a heavily fortified position right in the middle of hostile territory, something that will definitely come in handy in the coming months. But, after realizing that within mere 2 months our forces almost reached their capital, Austrian forces finally reorganized themselves and will now try to take back their lost initiative. And as you can see, they seem to know what they're doing. Instead of trying to attack our main force on the river and risking a dangerous choke point battle, they transported their men across Danube and marched right at our recovering army of natives. And in this case, Imperial forces clearly do not want to leave anything to chance, and they're bringing all their troops to this fight. But thankfully our own president will be able to join in as well, albeit with only a limited number of soldiers, as he will have to leave the majority of his men on the river in case of rear attack. So, it appears our warband will have to face yet another battle. Let's see if they have learned their lessons. And here we are on this very pretty spring day, ready to engage Kaiser's men once more. And they will not have an easy time trying to deal with us, because Commander Mickiewicz picked a perfect place for a defensive battle. Our army is stationed on a large hill, with a perfect view of the valley below, where our enemies won't find even a slightest shred of cover as they approach. Also, to make sure our positions are even better prepared, our archers have been sent forward to spring a little surprise for our enemies. A nice wall of sharpened stakes of our own, that'll deny our enemy their cavalry advantage. See, when I started this battle, I kinda expected to just use regular stakes, like the ones deployed in front of my cannons, but as it turns out, Native American troops are not really good at military engineering and they were not able to use them. Thankfully, native archers have this special ability that enables them to place a mobile version of sharpened stakes, and because we're fighting in the open, we shouldn't have too many problems deploying them like last time. Unfortunately, placing stakes, even in the open, takes a while, and once Austrian commander realized what we are doing, he immediately sent his horsemen to stop us. And this time we won't be facing just some light cavalry or standard horse regiments. No, this time we'll have to deal with Kaiser Leopold's personal cuirassiers, a very heavy cavalry stronger than any horse unit we could bring to this fight, even our national cavalry. And their charge would have demolished our bowmen, but luckily we've managed to deploy the stakes at the last moment, and now this heavy cavalry will be skewered. Still, the stakes our men deployed were not as sturdy as ones our engineers prepare, and after the first charge most of them collapsed. They took many of those cuirassiers with them, but now there's a huge gap in our defenses. More than that, now our archers had to face those heavy horsemen in melee, but as you can see, within just a few seconds, they've managed to fight them off. A development that surprised me just as much as it must have surprised enemy commander. I think it has something to do with morale shocks. Basically, that unit lost half its strength in a matter of seconds, and that must have reduced their morale so much that, combined with our local numerical advantage and almost instant loss of their commander, they just fled without looking back. But regardless of reason, we've just managed to eliminate the most prestigious regiment Austrians had in the field. The rest of their army will surely be unnerved by it. And to make matters even worse for themselves, our enemies decided to just keep throwing their cavalry at us. Now, it would have made sense if they had stormed already weakened parts of our shoddy barricade, but instead they chose to throw themselves at yet another set of stakes further down the line. Now, it would have been acceptable, in a very grim way, if they had much more cavalry coming as reinforcements, and they were only using those light hussars to clear the obstacles out of the way. But actually, most of Imperial forces' infantry, who will be slowed down by those stakes, true, but not outright killed like their horsemen. So, I have no idea what Austrian commander is trying to pull off here, but as long as he throws his soldiers away without causing harm to my side, I'm alright with it. Also, with most of enemy mobile units taken out, I can now send my own riders to harass Imperial flanks and, hopefully, deal with their artillery, which is proving surprisingly accurate despite firing at my elevated position. Now, there are two issues our men will have to contend with in this battle. First one is the wind, or rather lack of it, which means our musket-armed troops will have their view constantly obscured by a thick layer of smoke, which will reduce their accuracy. Second issue is that small patch of forest on our right flank. While, as mentioned before, most of the approach to our hill is devoid of any cover, these woods are the exception, and quite a lot of Austrian units will actually try to advance through this forest in order to get close to our lines while minimizing their casualties. Mickiewicz is going to keep several archer units there as a reserve, but we'll have to keep a constant eye on this forest in case of sudden mass attack. And as on cue, the attack came almost immediately. But once again, Austrian troops failed to use the opportunity properly. They tried to use their superior range of their muskets to engage my bowmen without giving them a chance to shoot back, but I just moved my men forward a bit and immediately removed enemy advantage. And now even the terrain is working against them. Austrian troops technically have a higher ground in this engagement, but the land curves a little in the forest, and as a result the only thing Imperial troops can see is a bunch of feathers moving around in the trees. They will try to reform to get a better line of sight, but all the while they will be showered with arrows, which our men can fire in an arc without having to worry about the terrain. So far, our position seems safe. But now we have to deal with yet another problem. While we're holding off the first wave of enemy assault, more and more enemy units arrived on the field to replace their shattered cavalry, and that spells trouble for our own, already weakened horsemen who were sent around enemy formation to silence their artillery. For a moment there I wanted to call them off, but then I realized that one of cavalry units that arrived on the field was actually Austrian general commanding this whole operation, and more than that, he seemed eager to fight my mounted gunners in melee. So, our men gave him a few volleys and charged in, but that's where the situation will turn in our enemy's favor. See, even though my horsemen have an overwhelming numerical advantage in this situation, Austrian bodyguards are so strong our advantage won't really matter. Even though our men will completely surround that unit, they will hold on for a very long time, killing or wounding many of my now irreplaceable auxiliaries. But Commander Mickiewicz will not leave his men to be slaughtered, not if he can help it. So, after realizing what's going on, he took his staff officers and rode on to join his men. He will have to take a long detour around the battlefield to avoid the bulk of Imperial army, but as long as his warriors are in danger, he will not relent. Our main line will have to make do on their own, but they shouldn't have too many problems dealing with a bunch of suicidal horsemen. It is now several minutes later, and the fight at the back of enemy army still rages on, and as you can see from the numbers at the bottom, Imperial General and his men have already took down over 100 of my auxiliaries, and to make matters even worse, sudden appearance of yet another cavalry unit forced Mickiewicz to extend his detour even more to stay clear of them. But now, as I zoom in to check up on our troops, one of the brave warriors finally lands a fatal hit on Austrian commander's horse, and a man falls to the ground only to be immediately trampled to death by our own steed. Native warriors raise a cheer, but their celebration is cut short by a volley coming from enemy infantry. They held fire up to this point, but once they realized their commander is done for, friendly fire no longer mattered to them. So, our men had to run back, and just in time, because you are able to see them in the background, there is yet another unit of enemy cavalry, and they rode straight on for Commander Mickiewicz. Thankfully, once they realized our battered cavalry is much easier target, they changed course. The rescue operation is still a go. But Austrian forces are not going to just give up. As our cavalry units crash into each other, enemy infantry steadily closes the distance, ready to open fire as soon as they have a clear shot. Even remnants of their late general's staff are throwing themselves at Mickiewicz in order to delay him. It seems our adversaries really want to take down our cavalry, and you can see here that one of our companies is already running, since there's only 24 of them left. If this continues, our tribal army might be as good as done after this battle. And here you can see just how determined our enemies are. Their infantry marched into spitting distance of the fight between my riders and Hungarian hussars and opened up at point-blank range. Thankfully, they only fired a single volley before one of the more reasonable officers ordered them to stop, as they were causing friendly fire. Still, that volley costed us dearly, breaking yet another one of our units. But further down the line, Commander Mickiewicz, after finally dealing with his pursuers, spotted an open path leading right to enemy artillery. still limbered and isolated behind enemy lines. So now he will take his remaining men and rush those guns while they're undefended, but after that the raid is over. We've lost way too many men, and aside from dead enemy general, we don't have much to show for it. We'll have to fall back and regroup. But there is one bit of good news here. Our president, Sebastian Stolarski himself, arrived on the field, his national cavalry already closing in behind him. Soon our elite troops will stand side by side with our tribal warriors. But that doesn't mean our warriors are just going to step aside and let someone else take the glory here. See, before he left, Mickiewicz ordered his troops located on the left flank, 2 units of bows and 2 units of muskets, to use the confusion his raid will cause to sneak into a small forested hill roughly in the middle of the battlefield. The plan here was to create a secondary delaying position capable of intercepting Austrian reinforcements before they link up with the main assault, and as you can see the plan worked well, too well to be honest, because once Austrians realized we are behind them, they called off their main attack and most of their forces focused on retaking that small hill. Now, I briefly considered sending my front line to pursue them, but then I realized that my men, who were fighting without break for quite a while now, could probably use this break to tend to their wounded and catch their breaths, and besides there are even more cuirassiers coming in, and fighting them in the open would be a suicide. So for now, our main force will stay behind their fortifications, and the delaying force will have to hold on their own. Hopefully, with their superior position, they will have little trouble. Interestingly, enemy heavy cavalry just paraded right in front of my men, though their heavy armor kept most of them safe. And just as I was starting to think they were idiots, they turned around and charged at my exposed flank, where the trees weren't so dense and the slope not so steep. Basically, they sacrificed a couple of their own to get into superior position without causing alarm, and now we're going to pay a heavy price for it. Thankfully, there was some mix-up in enemy ranks because they wasted precious few seconds organizing their charge, giving our bowmen a chance to face them. Not that it will help us, mind, but at the very least we won't suffer the morale penalty of being flanked. But still, our musketmen on the front will probably feel the pressure, knowing there's a company of heavy cavalry slaughtering their friends just a few steps behind them. But our warriors are not going to give up. Once enemy charge lost its impact, our bowmen will start biting them back, and though our unit will take devastating losses in the process, they will buy their comrades some time to organize counter-strike. See, one of our cav companies, just a handful of men we have left, and our second archer unit rushed right to the flank of that melee, and now they will open fire at point-blank range, shooting our enemies in the back. And because of the terrain, and the size of enemy horses, we won't have to worry too much about friendly fire. Besides, even if we had to, it wouldn't have mattered. If this cuirassier unit breaks through, it will demolish our entire position. So, we'll just have to keep firing and hope for the best. And we are going to need some luck here, because this cavalry charge emboldened the rest of Austrian troops, and now they're closing the distance fast, ready to join the grind. And interestingly, they seem to have a former citizens of a Commonwealth with them, organized into this expatriate regiment. I don't exactly know who they are, maybe they're former lesser nobility who lost everything and now have to serve as common foot soldiers, or maybe they're people fleeing from the now cold Ministry of Public Decency. Regardless of their motives, they are now our enemy, and we'll have to kill them before they get a chance to kill us. And thankfully, that's exactly what happened. Even though our enemies outnumbered us, they were so tired after their uphill charge, they gave up their attack after just a few moments. Even better, we managed to take out the cuirassier company. The hill is still ours. Let's see how long it's going to remain that way. Quite a while, it turns out, and over the next 15 or so minutes, Austrian army crashed into our forward position time and again, relentlessly trying to kick us out of the hill. Our position held them off nicely, with musketeers laying down constant fire, while archers supported them by shooting over their heads, and we managed to push Imperial forces back several times, inflicting serious casualties in the process. But with each Austrian attack we lost more and more men, and soon the final determined wave of enemies reached the hill and swarmed our exhausted warriors. But even then we managed to hold on for some time, and some units fought on so hard they've actually bought 2 regiments enough time to escape. One of them broke off and retreated, but they reformed after a while, and the other pulled out in good order and limped back to the safety of our main position. In the end, the hill was lost, but our enemies paid dearly for this small victory, and their corpses littered the hill and the approach below. And more than that, we took out all Austrian artillery in the meantime, and our main line had enough time to reform and rest, so now Imperial forces have another, far more dangerous climb ahead of them. But they were so confident after beating us on the smaller hill that they've actually decided to attack immediately, without reforming their line or even resting a bit. And so, a few minutes later, first groups of Imperial soldiers started climbing the large hill. And they've actually approached this smartly by moving their men towards the weakest point of the line, where remnants of earlier fight on the smaller hill gathered to rest up. More, the terrain there actually protected Austrian troops from our canister shot and from fire coming from our main line. But they made one mistake. They thought our battered warriors are no longer in shape to fight. Instead, our men screamed for revenge, and after giving Austrian grenadiers a few volleys, they charged downhill, screaming and waving their tomahawks, crying for blood for their fallen comrades. And within a few moments, that grenadier unit just disintegrated under our fierce attack, and soon the pride of Austrian army, much less than they were just a minute ago, turned to flee, and they were so shocked they actually tried to escape through our men. If they want to take the hill, they will have to work much harder for it. And soon the rest of enemy force arrive, and this time we're not going to play with them. We're just going to draw our hatchets, run at them and force them into final decisive brawl right here, right now. Our artillery ceases fire, our horsemen rush to flanking positions, and our main line lets out one thunderous war cry and surges forward, ready to push exhausted Austrians all the way back to Vienna. And in that last moment everything turns into chaos. Some regiments break off while others fight relentlessly for a long time. Some Imperial companies try to break through to our guns, but we intercept them and force yet another melee. In the back, more perceptive Austrian officers spot our national cavalry already moving in to surround them and try to organize some sort of defense, but they simply don't have enough men to cover all angles. All across the field, the crack of muskets is replaced by the sound of clashing weapons and men screaming as they fight in close combat. But as our ring of steel tightens around Imperial forces, it becomes obvious who will be the victor today. One by one, enemy regiments drop their weapons and turn to flee, desperately trying to escape the howling horde chasing them. And soon it's all over. They're all running away, and now we'll be able to chase them and make sure they won't be able to return to Vienna to man the defenses. So that's it. Imperial forces had one chance to counterattack, and as you can see here, they have failed decisively, losing 4,500 men, while we lost less than 1,000. But while it is impressive, we must remember that this is the wound that won't heal so easily. We've already used our one free replenishment, so every losses we took in this battle are going to be permanent, at least until we sail to the New World and back. But one thing is sure, Mickiewicz and his warriors are going to celebrate today. We'll leave them to their celebration for now, and we'll instead turn our attention once again to our Caribbean theatre. As General Lee Horowitz is replenishing his force, Admiral Bobrovsky sent one of his ships to sail north and scout out British colonial possessions in North America. And soon we realized just what kind of mess we put ourselves into, as we uncovered that every single one of 13 provinces is absolutely packed full with redcoats. And while some of them are, like troops who defended Jamaica, only colonial militia, the vast majority are actually professional, well-trained troops. As our ships moves further north, it uncovers more and more armies guarding every settlement and patrolling the countryside. And that was when I realized that, without some serious backup from Europe, our colonial campaign is doomed to fail, as our single army will never be able to make a dent in all those redcoats. Granted, our enemies are mostly focused around Florida, where they border their Spanish enemies, but even if they redeploy, say, a sixth of their forces to deal with us, we will not be able to stop them. It's time, I think, to call on for some reinforcements. But first, it's time to pursue the remnants of Austrian army. Seizing the momentum of our victory, General Tomaka, the one who took the fort in Hungary, abandoned his fortifications and surrounded Pressburg, current capital of Hungary. And now President Stolarski himself, supported by General Rybak and Commander Mickiewicz, will march east and surround Vienna itself. But we are not going to attack, not yet at least, as our president has some reservations about the whole affair. After all, Austrians are beaten and severely outnumbered, and they won't be able to counterattack, so we can just wait and starve them out. A sound strategy, but I think Stolarski might be forgetting all those Venetians to the south. And here's a surprise. As our forces dug in and prepared for at least a few months of siege, An Ottoman army suddenly marched in from the south and threw themselves at Pressburg, and their attack was so sudden that our General Tomaka, who is overseeing that siege, was taken completely by surprise, and before he organized his men, Sultan's soldiers were already throwing themselves at the fortifications. Now, the battle was nothing special. Our forces started outside of the field, and before we organized ourselves and reached the walls, Ottoman army was already beating back the last defenders on the main square. But still, there was one interesting thing about this fight, something that happens very rarely in Empire Total War. So rarely, in fact, that I saw it for the first time. I'm talking about sword fighting. See, most infantry units in this game are armed with either bayonets or just use their muskets as clubs in melee. Some units are armed with swords, but it's actually very rare to see actual sword duels. Mostly it's just sword versus bayonet combo, but here we have an opportunity to actually witness some fencing, and man, are those animations impressive. Hell, some of them may even be better than choreographic duels from Shogun 2, because they are faster and fiercer and actually look like two people desperately trying to survive the encounter, rather than two outlandish samurai dancing around each other. Now, some people dislike those matched animations, but personally I really like them, even though I realize they are often very unrealistic. Still, I think Rome and Attila dealt with them the best by giving modders an option to adjust the rate those animations appeared. But regardless, I just wanted to show you this sweet clip of violent sword fighting. Too bad it wasn't the only surprise in this battle. Thank you for all your reports, gentlemen, and I commend you for your performance in these past few months. The Commonwealth is proud to have such capable commanders protecting our independence. Now, if there's nothing else, return to your unit and keep me posted. Actually, sir, there is one thing we'd like to discuss a bit more before we leave, namely the siege of Vienna you and your army are currently overseeing. Of course, any advice is welcome. Very well, but before I begin, let me assure you that I speak for all of us here. General Rybak, Commander Mickiewicz and I discussed this for the past few days, and we believe that besieging Vienna is no longer necessary. In fact, we think our chances of winning the entire war decisively are diminishing with every passing day, and as such we are obliged to tell you that our forces should mount an assault without delay, even tomorrow if possible. I see. Tell me, General, when was the last time you've taken part in a siege assault? I have not, sir, and you are aware of that. But right now is the perfect opportunity to strike. Our forces are concentrated around the city, and from what we've learned from our scouts, Venetians still haven't fully mobilized their forces. There will be no better time to attack, sir. And throw our men into yet another bloodbath? You haven't seen Stockholm, General. You haven't seen what I've seen. Assaulting fort is always a bloody affair, especially if the defenders know they have everything to lose. And now, with Leopold among their ranks, Austrians will fight to the last man, of that I'm sure. Besides, generals, before the war you have all agreed that Vienna was to be surrounded and forced to surrender by a prolonged siege without putting our men at risk. I will not throw my people into meat grinder because of your ambitions. 'Tis not ambition that drove us to this decision, Mr. President, but our military education. Yes, we have agreed to your plan, but that was 4 months ago and the situation has changed. We have not expected this sudden appearance of Ottoman forces, not to mention their assault on Pressburg took everyone by surprise. We also have not anticipated Vienna to be this poorly defended. But after Imperial forces threw themselves at Commander Mickiewicz, they gave us an opportunity to deliver a finishing blow. It would be foolish of us not to use it. Now, Mr. President, I understand storming the walls is a task better left to the common soldiers instead of the elite guardsmen of yours, and as such we are all here to offer our own armies for this assault. All we ask is for you to join us, oversee the battle and act as a symbol for the soldiers. It is, after all, imperative that you should be among those who put the Emperor and his sycophants to justice. And besides, who is to say our Ottoman allies won't show up and steal this victory from us as well? If we, the nation that once defended Vienna, will take the city for ourselves, it will serve as a symbol and a warning to all our enemies. But if we let the Turks march in, Europe will see us as fickle allies, unable to deal with our own problems, not to mention the inevitable repercussions from the Pope. It will hurt us in the long run. I don't give a damn what they will think, and I do not care which army will take point. Whether mine or yours, these are still our citizens, Rybak. I will not order them to charge into Firestorm, and no amount of political nonsense will convince me otherwise. If you are so willing to lose your life, try rushing at the walls yourself. But I will not be responsible for yet another massacre. Not again. Mr. President, regardless of your personal feeling, I must— Ow! You are right, sir. We have overstepped our ranks. It is not our place to judge the plan we've all agreed upon. We apologize for it. Now, with your leave, we're going to return to our soldiers. Very good, you are dismissed, and I want full report on the state of your troops by midday tomorrow. Apologies for that jab back there, General Rybak, but this conversation was turning sour very quickly. Better to withdraw when there's still a chance. You're right, Commander. I should have known trying to convince him won't get us anywhere. If only we knew our president was a damned coward. I do not think cowardice is at fault here, at least not entirely. Our president has a very good reason to feel uneasy about storming the walls. After all, last time he tried, he ended up almost dead. But today, that wasn't just fear talking through him, but alcohol. There were at least 3 empty bottles scattered around in this tent, and my nose tells me it's that strong Belarusian stuff Stolarski enjoys so much. Impressive. I only noticed 1 bottle back there. But you're right, Commander, there's no point trying to discuss with a drunk. I'll try to find his adjutant after we're done here. Maybe we could convince him to cut our president off. We could try to talk to him once again once he's sober. Or, well, sober enough. That might work. But in case it won't, we need to come up with another plan. Something that will keep this siege under control without jeopardizing the entire campaign. Talk to your staff officers, they may have some ideas. I'll see you both tomorrow. For the Commonwealth! So, Fortress Pressburg has been captured, and we haven't lost a soul in the process, but there is an issue. As our men marched into the fort itself, they were greeted by Ottoman commander, who has already claimed the fort, and the region of Hungary itself, in the name of the High Port. I mean, sure, technically speaking they did all the heavy lifting in this fight, but nonetheless our men are not too thrilled about that, especially General Tomaka, who wanted to prove himself and, speaking on the side of course, liberate some spoils of war. But we can't really do anything about this situation, not without turning it into a diplomatic incident. To be honest, I was taken completely by surprise by all this. I always thought that you can't just attack the city that is already besieged by someone else, but maybe this is not the case in Empire. Anyway, we now have to adjust our strategy. We can't just sit around Vienna, because soon Ottomans might try this trick again, and while we can afford giving them Hungary, even though it's a large and rich region we certainly could use, allowing them to march into Vienna would make us look like fools. But we can't really do this. First, our president is not so eager to commit to the assault, and 2, storming walls of Vienna would expose us to a rear attack from Venice, who could just rush our troops and surround Austrian capital as soon as we're inside it, trapping us in the city we're trying to conquer. We need to figure out some other plan. Thankfully, our officers rose to the task, and soon another strategy is formed. Instead of focusing all our forces around Imperial capital, we'll just leave our president there, while our other generals will continue their advance against now crippled Empire. After all, what better way to avoid being surrounded by Venetians than surrounding them ourselves? And so our armies begin to march once again. Commander Mickiewicz and his battered, though very eager warriors set off to the west towards Munich, capital of Bavaria, which is protected only by a handful of garrison troops, and soon they are joined by General Tomaka as well, creating a large and, most importantly, very versatile force. So, with those armies marching west, General Rybak took his own force and moved south towards Croatia, the southernmost regions of Austrian Empire. And the situation there is exactly like the one in Bavaria. Only a few hastily organized defenders are standing in our way, and we even managed to convince a few hundred Ottoman soldiers to join in. So, with such an advantage, we simply sent our enemies an offer of surrender, and though they discussed it for a very, very long time, finally they made the right decision and allowed us right into the city. That's 4th one we took from our enemies without firing a shot. We tried the same thing in Munich, and same as before, vassals of Emperor Leopold lowered their weapons and abandoned their fortifications without opposing us. It seems that 12 years of war really sapped their strength, and now all Austrian people want is to finally live in peace, no matter under which banner. But still, peace may be a long way off. So far, our Venetian enemies have been unusually quiet, but now that we officially border their lands, they might decide it's time to check our advance. And actually, that is the point of this whole operation. My hope here is that now, with my armies spread around, Venetians will split their forces apart as well, and try to fight us both in Croatia and Bavaria, allowing Stolarski to make a move against Vienna without constantly watching his back. Now, there is a danger that Venetians might try to move all their forces against single targets instead of spreading out, but that should work as well. If they all move, say, to Croatia, Mickiewicz and Rybak will be able to swoop down upon them from the north. Now, there is yet another possibility. They could just ignore our flanking forces and go for Stolarski directly, driving a wedge between our forces. Which, as you might expect, would be very bad, but now we don't really have an option to do anything about it. We'll just deal with the situation as it unfolds. And now for the final part of our plan. The part so secret that even the highest-ranking officials in the country had no idea about it. Or rather, that's what we're going to say in official memoirs, because the truth is far more simple. Poniatowski got off the leash once again and, with support of some mysterious benefactors, made his way to Great Britain and landed his force of battle-hardened veterans on the Scottish coast, surprising both our High Command and British royal family. For the first time since, I think, William the Conqueror, England, well, Great Britain in this case, has to deal with continental invaders marching across their island. A historic moment, to be sure. But our general is not here to conquer anything. He has something far more different in mind. We'll see what exactly in the next episode of the Crownless Eagle. See you next time. Ah, there you are, Colonel. I trust everything is in order. Yes, sir, everything's according to your plan, though actually I have a question about that plan, if I may. You see, sir, at first I thought you merely wanted to send a message to our enemies by razing that village, but after everything that's happened since we've landed, are we really going to execute every man, woman and child we encounter on the way, sir? We are not executing them, Colonel, we're giving them a choice. Join our army or die. The few patrolling soldiers are out of the question, of course, but our ranks are open to everyone else. And from what I hear, we gained some promising recruits and camp followers in the process. Also, Colonel, do not be naive. The fleet has sailed off to deal with the Royal Navy, and until they return we are alone and in a hostile land. Once you realize that, you will see there are no civilians here, only enemies who will harass our forces constantly and without mercy. We could only extend our offer to the men, but then what? Hungry children would sneak into our supply stores. Women would try to seduce our soldiers and slice their throats in dark corners of the camp for scraps of food. Better to deal with them immediately and focus on the task at hand. Regardless, sir, some of the men, both high-ranking officers and regular troops, are wondering where this will lead to. After all, it's one thing to fight an enemy who fights back, but slaughtering village after village is not something our men are used to, and to be honest, neither am I, sir. I see. Thank you for sharing your concerns, Colonel. But let me assure you that everything I do, every order I give is to make sure we will prevail in this war, and beyond it. Besides, you are just a subordinate. I will take full responsibility for every action committed by our troops during this campaign. Apologies, sir, but as your second-in-command I cannot agree. It is my responsibility as well, and as such I urge you to find another way to conduct this operation, for so far we're not acting like soldiers of the Commonwealth, but like common criminals. Tell me something, Colonel. Are you familiar with Genghis Khan? Of course, sir, but I don't see what. Then listen. Long ago, when Temujin's horde was galloping across the known world, they faced many obstacles along their path to glory. His host, though numerous and powerful in the open field, was ill-suited to take on walled cities. And so, whenever they approached one, the Great Khan would give the defenders one chance to surrender. If they took it, their lives would be spared, and their city joined the ever-growing power of the Golden Horde. And if they refused, the nomads would surround the city, take it, and slaughter everyone inside it. I intend to do the same here. Now, I'm sure there were those in Great Khan's host who told him the same thing as you said to me just now, and yet the names of those people were forgotten, while Temujin and his empire live on in human memory to this very day. That's right, sir, but we are not Mongols. We're not here to build an empire, but to keep our British enemies busy and to make sure they won't launch an invasion against our heartlands. Precisely. And we will do so by making our enemies fear us, by making them fear me. Just like the Great Khan did hundreds of years ago. And to prove that this is the right course of action, let me ask you this simple question. Have you heard of me before you joined the army? Of course you have, like everyone else. And now take a look at this list. Do you recognize any of the names on it? No, sir. Should I? No, and that's the whole point. This scrap of paper contains the names of my friends from long time ago. Most of them they fought by my side when I was but a young officer deployed to patrol Podolia and Ukrainian border. They were all good friends and good soldiers, but now they are all dead. Some of them died fighting in some insignificant skirmishes with Cossack raiders. Others succumbed to sickness or alcohol. But they all have one thing in common. At some point in their short lives, they have saved mine, sometimes by taking a bullet or a sword in my stead. In a way, they are the reason the Commonwealth exists today, for if not for my support 14 years ago, Potocki would have crushed that little rebellion assembly put together. And what have my friends and comrades received for their efforts, for their valiant lives and deaths? Nothing. They have been forgotten and history will never know their names. And when the last of my childhood friends took a sword that was meant for me during Battle of Berlin, I made a promise. I promised, not them but myself, that I will not be forgotten. That is why I will use every strategy and tactics, no matter how barbaric they may seem to people like you. That is why I will never accept the world this Commonwealth is building, a world where everyone is just a cog in a machine of state, and exceptional people are treated like madmen or criminals. That is why we're here, Colonel. I will burn my name into this land if I'll have to, but I will not slip into obscurity like Lempicki or Potocki. And you, Colonel, and those who doubt me, you can either fight at my side or get crushed under my heel. But you will not stand in my way.